All right. So welcome everyone, and thank you for taking some time out of your day to join me. My name is Laura Neinast, and I am the Human Resources Manager for Burial Beer Co. here in Asheville. I have a working human resources management history in tourism and the local brewery community. And so hopefully with my experience in creating new programs and protocols to improve employee retention and engagement, I hope to shed some light on why paying a living wage is so important. Some steps that you can take to prepare and some potential hurdles employers and businesses can face during this process of change. Also, before I get started, I wanted to thank Dwayne Adams and Jill Sparks with AB Tech Small Business Center for inviting me to speak with y'all today. And also mention that if anybody would like PDF copies of the slides that we're going to go over today emailed to you, feel free to drop your email in the chat box and I will get that all out to you after the presentation today. So if you have any questions during the presentation or at the end, just feel free to either drop them in the chat or unmute. If we don't hit all of them in our time allotted here, just feel free to email me directly. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation for y'all. So let's get rolling. So first I wanted to create some clarification on living wage versus minimum wage. So minimum wage, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is the lowest amount of money an employee can earn that's mandated by law. So it does not provide enough income to survive, and it does not rise with inflation, or at least as often as it should. So then we have living wage, which refers to essentially the theoretical income level that allows individuals and families to avoid adequate shelter, food, transportation, and other basic necessities without public or private assistance, which is super important. And then it also provides a little bit of discretionary income as well. So the goal of living wage is to allow employees to earn enough income for a satisfactory standard of living and, ultimately prevent them from falling into poverty. So it is a more just minimum wage. So can anyone tell me, you can either unmute or drop in the chat box, how you think employees benefit from being paid a living wage? What are some shifts that you might see?
I would imagine less turnover for sure.
Sure, less turnover, yep. Anyone else?
More dollars in the community.
Absolutely, retention, happier employees. Awesome, good. So higher wages are associated with better health, which means that there's less illness and more stamina, which in turn enhances worker productivity. So on a more obvious side of that, better paid employees simply just work harder. Employees are more productive when their wages are higher. And that's because they care more about holding on to their job. They can also experience a reduction in financial stress, which is, pretty obvious, right? So when financial stress is present in individuals and their families, they often work excessive hours or multiple jobs. And then, if anybody here has done that in their past or knows somebody who has, working, excessive hours or multiple jobs can lead to burnout and exhaustion and, even lead to resentment as well. So the effect on personal well-being and the capacity subconsciously kind of carries over to performance and mental health. So when this stressor is relieved or eliminated, it is really directly linked to an improved quality of life for the employees and their families, whatever way that looks like. So they're able to provide and have access to the basic needs such as food, housing, health, and even education. And, if they have kids, they're able to be there more for their family, to give them the support that they need, the presence that they, require from their parents. The families have more time to be together, and individuals can access personal health and well-being. So that necessity of work-life balance becomes a very graspable future for them. A less thought about benefit is a reduction in barriers to social inclusion. So working individuals at the bottom of a pay scale are disproportionately represented by minority groups. And so by committing to paying a living wage, you're really opening the door for opportunity for everybody. And that's something that you will, continue to hear as a theme throughout this presentation. So without a fair livable wage, people aren't able to build a savings for their future, and they're not able to support their basic needs. So if you think about it, it's hard to stay and grow in a career or a field that underpays you when you can't make ends meet, or live comfortably without taking a second job. So if an employee is working one or more side jobs in order to support or supplement pay from a job in their preferred industry, they're going to find it really hard to move up in that industry. What are some things that you guys think, in order to move up in an industry as somebody kind of working their way from the bottom, what are some things that you think are necessary acts in order to achieve that personal growth for yourself? Feel free to unmute, or you can drop it in the chat box. A quiet group today. Some of the things is, maybe you are looking into continuing education. And either, you don't have the time to do that because you have to run off to another job, or the funds to do it. Making the connections that you need to in that industry, whether it's to cultivate a mentor or to make, important connections with people to, learn that way and lead you to like new experiences and opportunities. So all of that would be really hard to manage if you have to rush to another job or you can't afford going to a networking event. So it's just a couple of things to think about for employees and how important it is for them. So what do you think the benefits would show themselves as for employers and their businesses? I'm going to try to force y'all to chat with me today.
I'll start and say less sick time.
Less sick time.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, these
better quality employees.
Yes, absolutely. So that, you can kind of tell they start to sound like they're mirroring quite closely to the benefits of the employee, which we just, kind of went over a little bit. So employers across many different industries have found that paying lower wages is ultimately pretty counterproductive. So there's a strong business case surrounding the benefit to employers who pay a living wage. When employers are motivated to do their jobs, comes not just a higher productivity, but also it's a higher quality of work and a higher quality of product. Think about yourself in that position. Employees want to be valued. They want to be a valued member of a team and a company. They want to feel like their efforts are an integral part of something bigger and that they're important. They want to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of respect, and dignity. These are all things that are super important to them. And so if they feel those things, in turn, you will see that increase of motivation. So by committing to helping these individuals financially meet their basic needs and then some, you're really acknowledging their value and then therefore enhancing their motivation to deliver as well. So with that also comes an increase in morale. So there's an inherent positive culture shift that you will see, maybe not right away, but you will see it with paying a living wage consisting of an increase in your employees' commitment and connection to the company. You can see lower absenteeism and maybe less disciplinary problems and ultimately less turnover too, right? So depending on your industry, you may also see less workplace accidents. And that could be directly related to better facilitated teamwork or accountability. And a less obvious and more overlooked benefit to living wage is healthier workers. So this is directly related to providing the wages needed for basic care and reducing the loss of working hours due to sickness. So if you're a company of 50 or more, or you will one day get there, that may look like competitive insurance plans alongside of a living wage. Or if you're smaller, just getting off the ground, this may show up in a calculated minimum living wage that's suggested for employees who are not offered benefits if you're not able to do that right away. So that means that the necessary self-care funds are already built into that recommended number for a living wage, which we will talk more about that here in a little bit. Next, we'll see that paying a living wage is a positive statement about your brand to the community. So since you now have motivated and engaged employees, it's likely that you will see an improvement in the quality of job applicants during the recruitment process. This also circles back around to less turnover and less costs associated with recruitment and training. And ultimately, you might end up seeing an increase in sales as well. So consumers are drawn to businesses that take care of their employees. So the local consumer, there's more of a moral investment in our local community members and also into the local economy, right? And Asheville being such a tourist-driven town, for the out-of-towners, it may be a reflection of the growing demand for ethical consumption, which is one of those rapidly growing more in the forefront of awareness for a lot of people. And so ultimately with all this, you can see how it paves the way for a positive return on investment. So you have retained employees, you have a higher quality product or service, you have brand recognition in the community. So over time, this positive outcome and return on investment can lead to company growth. Company growth can lead to creation of more jobs. And then job creation means more equal opportunities for everybody. And I promised y'all that would be a recurring theme in this presentation. So fair wages not only benefit workers and their companies, but they also help the economy as a whole to function well. So referencing the living wage network, when consumers buy products, companies and their workers profit, and thus the economy grows, right? So when wage inequities and lack of fair compensation occur, and at times can outweigh local communities of limited wealth, they can't afford to buy goods and they can't afford to buy services. And then that'll create an economy that lacks consumer demand. And so what happens when an economy lacks consumer demand?
Slows down.
slows down. It can get
People lose jobs.
stagnant. Yep, exactly. Absolutely. So living wages reduce the wage inequality by enabling workers to become more self-sufficient and strengthening their opportunities in the job market. I'm not sure if any or all of you are aware of Just Economics, but they state it very well by saying living wages are part of a broad effort to end poverty and inequity and work towards a more just and sustainable local economy. So it creates an economy that works for everybody, right? So those of you that may not be as familiar with Just Economics, Just Economics of WNC was born out of the Asheville Buncombe Living Wage Campaign. And as of 2007, they are our regional membership organization who works to educate, advocate, and organize for a just and sustainable local economy in Western North Carolina. So obviously, you are not required to become a certified employer. However, this will give you an idea of what to work towards achieving for your employees if you aren't able to do it right off the bat. So a certified employer may use benefits that affect basic needs, such as food, housing, transportation, and healthcare, to kind of offset the wage criteria that you see here. So if you're not able to offer these kind of benefits, the rate you would be aiming to pay an employee in 2021 in Asheville, Buncombe County is $17.30 an hour. If you are an employee who offers health insurance or other applicable benefits that affect these basic needs, such as the food and housing, et cetera, that we went over, you'll be looking more at the $15.80 an hour range. They do consider a few subtractions to wage criteria if you offer obviously the health insurance or other additional basic needs, and they do have a formula for determining that eligibility. And again, even if you are not looking to get certified and want more information around that, I highly recommend using them as a resource to lean on to get more information surrounding that. And just to clarify, these rates that you see here, they're for both part-time and full-time employees. So there's no differentiation. And that's partly because, if you have a part-time employee, it is, very likely that they have another part-time job, which would hopefully also be paying, a living wage. But oftentimes that's not the case. So it is to balance that out and kind of do the rates across the board for everybody. And a lot of you might have employees that have alternative means of compensation aside from an hourly wage. So that means tips, commission, could be per diem. So you are still eligible. It just requires a little bit more math on your end in order to ensure that it kind of averages out to these ranges that we have here as well. I did provide a link down here for those of you that are going to be receiving these slides via email that'll take you directly to the certification and eligibility for Just Economics. That'll go into a little bit more detail surrounding this for y'all. So I wanted to share this quick interview with Emma Hutchins. She's the program coordinator at Just Economics. The interview is from April 2021. And she speaks about living wage and the resources for employers and workers. And it is some pretty valuable information that I wanted to share with y'all. Can everybody hear that okay?
I am Kalani Jackson, and welcome to the Asheville View.
My name is Emma Hutchins, and I'm the Living Wage Program Coordinator for Just Economics.
So you said that you are a project coordinator with Just Economics, Western North Carolina. What all does your job entail?
So I run our living wage certification program. That is the largest program in the country. We have over 400 businesses that are living wage certified. And I also work with the Western North Carolina Workers Assembly. And I'm developing a program called Beyond Living Wages to work with businesses who are interested in implementing employee-centered policy. The federal minimum wage has not increased in the last 12 years. And I think that Western North Carolina is special in that the cost of housing has rapidly increased over the last few years. This is a very expensive place to live, and it's getting more expensive all the time. So when the cost of living increases and wages stay stagnant, people are really struggling to make ends meet. And I think that that's why a living wage program can help educate the public on how much it actually costs to make a living here, how much you need to make to not live in poverty, and to set some goals as a community about how we're going to take care of people. We calculate the Buncombe County living wage rate using the universal living wage formula. And if you just fell asleep during that sentence, I understand, but bear with me. It's based on federal housing data. I know, another really boring sentence, but we use what's called the fair market rent, which is like a snapshot of available housing at any given time. We use a 4-year average for the last 4 years fair market rent information, and we plug it into this formula, and it spits out the living wage rate, assuming that an individual isn't spending more than 30% of their income on the cost of living. So it's based on the cost of housing. It's specific to our area. We also use the housing information for a 1-bedroom. So for one individual in a 1-bedroom, which means if a person has dependents like children, if they're not able to find a 1-bedroom, the living wage rate for that person would actually be higher. So I think that our living wage rate, as high as it is, as shocking as that number sounds, is actually a conservative number. Also, considering the fact that we use a 4-year average for the fair market rent means that if we just plugged in the 2021 fair market rent for Buncombe County into our formula, the living wage rate would be closer to $21 an hour, which is just wild for me to think about. So we do have a formula that we use. We recalculate it every year, and it's based on the cost of housing. So that number that applies to Buncombe County might not be relevant somewhere else.
And another question that I have, so has this number changed like drastically from 2000, let's say 2017, 2018? During that time period, what was the cost of our living wage cost?
That's a great question. It's definitely been increasing more rapidly recently. So I started with Just Economics in 2019. The living wage rate was $13.65. In 2020, we recalculated it at $15.50 per hour. And in 2021, the number is $17.30. So that is a dramatic increase. If you look at the cost of housing has also increased dramatically in the past 4 years. So I just don't see the living wage rate going back down anytime soon. But I do think this bigger federal conversation around the minimum wage being increased to $15 an hour will make a really big difference for workers everywhere, especially in Western North Carolina, where the costs are rising so quickly.
Currently, the living wage is $17.30. So for an employer, what resources do you guys have to help an employer be able to pay their employees $17.30 per hour?
Sure. So, we are running a voluntary program. So any employer can decide that they want to become living wage. And that's often where we start to be in touch with an employer. Although sometimes we reach out to businesses because we hear they're doing good things and we think they might want to get involved with the program. But, if a business is not currently paying a living wage, but they want to, then we often recommend checking in with a local organization like the AB Tech Small Business Center that offers free coaching for small businesses, or Mountain BizWorks, and to just do a reevaluation of your business plan, because the living wage is high. I mean, it's a lofty goal. And so employers that aren't there yet, that's okay. We understand not everybody is going to be there. We recommend starting to look at your business plan and making a tiered plan where you're slowly increasing wages over time. Start where you can. $15 an hour, $15.50 was the living wage rate for 2020, and then build from there.
Sometimes it can be hard for people from different financial backgrounds to understand how the urgency of this matter, the urgency of this issue. So what programs do you have that could help somebody be more empathetic and be able to understand? Can you speak on the poverty simulator program?
Sure. So Just Economics, especially in pre-COVID times, had a poverty simulation that we would do with communities that is like living a day in the life of a low-wage worker. And so we do these with groups of people where you have you're assigned a family, you have a new name, you have a certain number of kids, and you have a certain income, and then you go through the experience of what it's like to try to make your bills, to make ends meet, to take care of your kids with a low-wage job. And it's often a really eye-opening experience for people. It's been difficult for us to do this program during COVID because we usually have a big room full of people running around and like holding baby dolls and big money. It's really silly, but it's also, I think it's really sobering experience. And we look forward to doing that again when we're able to be in person. We're also looking for ways to replicate that experience via Zoom. But I agree with you. It's difficult for people to understand what it's like to live in poverty if they've never lived in poverty before. I think our living wage program is first and foremost an educational program. We want people to understand how much the cost of living has impacted wages in this area and how much people need to survive. We also do work on transit and affordable housing in this community. We see all of these as being intricately linked. And all of these things are important for local people to have, to access. We all need to be able to get to work, to be able to access housing and groceries and childcare. So transit is a really big deal. Additionally, affordable housing is a huge problem in this area. Access to housing is a giant issue. And so we are an advocacy organization. We advocate and organize with low-wage people on all of these issues. And I think one of the things that I like most about working with Just Economics is that our work is driven by the people who are experiencing these issues, by the folks who ride the bus, are driving our transit work, people who are low-wage workers are informing our living wage work, and people who are who are lacking access to consistent affordable housing are people who are driving our work on affordable housing. And I think that is an important dynamic that I haven't seen in the years that I've worked with nonprofits. And I think having the folks who are most affected, who are leading the way to find the solutions, is really powerful.
All right, Emma, thank you so much. For people that are out here watching and they want to get in contact with you, what is the best way that they can reach you?
Sure. So our website is www.justeconomicswnc.org. And you can reach me directly at emma@justeconomicswnc.org.
Thank you, Emma, for your time.
All right. So hopefully that gave you, some helpful insight into some resources and, a little bit of a deeper perspective on how they can help assist, for sure. So looking to prepare a living wage. When you're first starting out to do this, the first thing you need to do is benchmark your current wages against the living wage in your county or region that you operate in. So you can do this by referring to calculators like the MIT Living Wage Calculator, which I have a link for right here. In this case, you can select your state and immediate county and get a dialed in number based off of family size and working individuals. But keeping in mind that this number that you get from this particular calculator, and oftentimes other living wage calculators that are similar, is that this is a much more dialed in number in terms of including a lot more in that. And now we all, heard what Emma had said about Just Economic in terms of how they calculate based off of the universal living wage formula. And by doing it this way, it makes it a graspable and attainable goal for employers. And also it brings the employees up to speed in the range of where they would need to be. So oftentimes if you do these living wage calculators, they will be giving you a higher rate than, say, what Just Economics is recommending for our immediate community. So next, you want to take a look at your business plan. If you don't have one, you probably should, or, create one. If you do, it might be time to look at updating it to incorporate living wage. So meet with your accountant. By doing that, you can prepare a cost report. So you'll go through and analyze each item in detail. This will include cash on hand, your cost of business operations, including pay raises, possible debt payments, and late payments from existing customers if that's worked into your business structure. But also keeping in mind that higher wages also means employers pay for more employer taxes. So that should also be incorporated into your business plan. Your accountant may also suggest doing something called a break-even analysis. I am not an accountant, so I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, but I can speak to the basics if you aren't familiar with it. So basically what a break-even analysis will do for you is it helps you determine at what point your business or your new product or service will become profitable, right? So this analysis, it won't result in a profit or a loss. So it'll instead determine the number of sales that you need to cover all of your variable and fixed costs. So it calculates the minimum number of units to sell and the sales volume needed to pay all your expenses before you make a profit. So to those of you who have done these before for your business, I encourage you to do this exercise when you see any increase in business costs, which in this case, wage adjustment, taking place now or in the future. And again, those are questions I won't go into detail about, but if you want to know more around that, I definitely recommend reaching out to your accountant or a consultant that you confide in. So you might get to a point where you feel you have to make decisions to successfully implement living wage pay across the board. So as I mentioned, always consult with your accountant or business consultant before making any final decisions. But instead of rushing into a decision to reduce staff, let's look at what we can do to avoid that. So can you reduce expenses anywhere? Can you redirect money in your budget from something less critical to payroll? Or can you invest your savings in a way that would give you a better return? You can also reconsider prices and services. Do you have to make any adjustments to your prices? Or can you provide any additional services or product features at a minimal cost to your customers to buffer that price increase? Sometimes by offering something new, it'll help pass the price increase to your customers if that's the best decision for you in this case. So we all know, raising prices isn't ideal, but definitely consulting through the proper channels through the weight of that decision is always really imperative. Analyze your hours of operation. Does it make sense to be open 7 days a week if you are? Can you eliminate overtime hours anywhere? Another thing you can think of is, can you automate any services? For example, do you need, if you have a dedicated payroll person, do you need one person specifically dedicated to that? Maybe, you or your HR professional or your accountant can take that task on. Or maybe there's other software that you can invest in to streamline reports, spreadsheets, project management, etc. Another thing to look at, is your rent too high? We're all very aware of the housing market in Asheville. Obviously, we just heard a little bit from Emma Hutchins on that as well, how it is not going to be going down. So this also goes for rent for businesses as well. If you already have an established location, this is not always an easy decision to sit with. But if you're paying through the roof for monthly rent, it might be smart to start browsing for something more affordable. ultimately, sometimes that can lead to a more practical space and location for what your product and service is geared towards. It could be a positive outcome. Next, scan your customer database. There's something called the 80-20 rule. So this typically applies to small businesses, and that 80% of your profit likely comes from 20% of your customers, right? So if you focus on the top 20% of your client base, you can share new ideas and services with them, kind of upgrade your customer service, but also not forgetting about the other 80% of your customers. You have to determine if they're still profitable, or if you have to consider making some changes. Obviously, this rule might not apply to every industry, but it is certainly a helpful angle to come at this with, that you can get really creative with. And lastly, make sure you have a well-designed salary structure plan. Living wage will, in most cases, have an effect on your existing wages. So make sure that you make equitable changes across the board to avoid salary compression. And that's something that we'll talk about in my next seminar that we'll be doing in October. So some things to keep in mind. In order for companies to adopt into living wage, it really requires a paradigm shift in the way leaders are thinking about their employees and the work that they do. So it's a long-term thinking process, but it can be done. On a more individual level, this may not seem like something that's 100% achievable at this very moment, and that is totally okay. If you look at what the living wage rates are for 2021 and what they were for 2020, you will notice nearly a $2 an hour leap, which is a lot, But what if you can just match 2020s or come close to that to start out? What is important to keep in the back of your mind is that you have adopted this new business strategy and a commitment, and you are willing to keep it, even if something like cutting labor costs would alleviate a budget crunch more immediately. You have to invest in the fact that you have this commitment to your employees and the future of your business. And so the old saying of you have to invest before you collect really kind of rings true here. So you have to invest in your employees and your ethos behind your business and give it time to catch up with itself before you really start to see that return that we were talking about earlier with, the business growth, and then in turn can lead to, your, expansion if that's what you want. So you can reach out to Just Economics to learn more as an interested employer or employee. And they can go a little bit more in depth on how you can prepare to pay a living wage in Asheville. The amount of resources and support they have for employers and employees is really invaluable. But the most important thing is that this is all attainable within realistic goals and planning for your particular business. So does anyone have any questions or any talking points that they wanted to kind of bring up in conversation? And if not, totally fine. If you have questions that come up later, feel free to email me at laura@burialbeer.com. I'd be happy to assist you or get an answer for you if I don't have it right away. And again, anybody who wants a copy of these slides, I'll be happy to email them to you. If you just drop your email address in the chat, I can get that out to you by the end of the day today as well. Well, thank you everybody for your time today, and for Dwayne and Jill. Oh, we do have a question. Faith. Feel free to unmute, Faith.
Sorry.
That's okay.
My name's Amy actually, and I'm on here with Faith.
Oh, gotcha.
I have
Perfect.
a gelato cafe that we're about to open, and I'm trying to understand. Have you seen the new law that just came out? It went into effect in April, and maybe got passed last December, but basically saying that restaurants can't pay tips to managers. And I'm trying. Can you speak to that? Because I'm trying to, related to the living wage, trying to get a person who's a manager to living wage,
Sure.
and was planning on including pooling tips and then sharing them based on the hours people worked. And then we got into this whole vortex about whether or not the manager can have tips. Anyway.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a great question. So you really have to look at the job description of that person. So if they're a manager and they have certain responsibilities listed in their job description, such as, obviously if they have people reporting to them, they have hiring and firing power, they have decision-making power. Oftentimes that will be, looked at as somebody who should be making more of a salary and not collecting on tips. And the idea behind that is that they are more in the admin side of things than they are in like on the floor in this case. And so there is really a fine line that you have to walk with that. And I can certainly get you some more information if you would like, with more details around, that tightrope walk about that new law that was passed for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I would love more information because it's that thing where we're a small team. So there'll be plenty of hours where this person's also, making coffee and scooping gelato, but also doing some managerial things. So.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much again for your time today. And I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday.